Thank you very much. If ever there's an idea worth spreading, it's the end of poverty. It's the making history of this terrible blight on humanity. It's the thing that divides us. It's the thing that creates inequality. It's the thing that we need to focus on. We've made incredible achievements over the last 25 years. We can be optimistic. Poverty in the world's fallen by about 300 million people, even though the world's population has increased by about 2 billion over this lifetime. We collectively, our social and political forces have never been more effective at fighting poverty than over this period of time. But over 1 billion people still live under $2 a day. Well over 2 billion people live under $3 a day. And when you walk here from King's Cross down the road, you walk by people who are living in dire poverty. It's around us, it's everywhere, it's in our lifetimes. And the key question is, can we make poverty history? The MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals, set a target of halving world poverty by 2010, and they succeeded. And now our target has to be eliminating poverty. And that implies also hugely reversing the growing inequality. Poverty comes in many forms, and when we think about it, we all have different images in our minds. We all think about different people. It has so many dimensions, dimensions which are defined by gender, by race, by age, by place. And of course, all of those matter. It's the poverty that's around us that we need to address first, but of course it's global poverty. A child dying anywhere in the world is on all of our conscience. Someone suffering because they don't have to is our responsibility. And that's not simply an ethical position, it's a position which I believe must be taken if we want to see a sustainable future, if we want a cohesive world. And poverty might even be getting worse. In fact, we might have reached peak poverty reduction. What does this mean? It means that we might be getting less effective and poverty might be getting much worse. And why do I say this? Because there are a number of forces building out there that we need to struggle against, that we need to push back if we're to eliminate poverty. Austerity, the financial crisis of 10 years ago, has greatly increased poverty. It's led to over 50 million people around the world being laid off. It's reduced pensioners' incomes and it's reduced the incomes of governments. It's led to the rising of fees, it's cutting of social security, the reduction of health budgets, education budgets, infrastructure. And as work in the Oxford Martin School, incidentally funded by Citi, has just shown, it has a dramatic increase on poverty and inequality. Austerity has greatly raised this. Another great challenge is that, of course, poverty intersects with all other dimensions of our lives. It intersects with where we live, how we live, whether we have water, whether we have food, whether we have the things we need. And the growing risks coming from climate change, from biodiversity loss, from water depletion and degradation, raise poverty and increase inequality. If you're rich, you can avoid these things. You can go to Las Vegas or Phoenix and live happily. Those are rapidly growing cities because you can turn on the aircon, pipe water from further and deeper. But of course, if you live in fragile places, if you don't have the money to pay for these things, your life can be wrecked and many people, many millions of people, of course, die as a result of these things. Risks exacerbate poverty, risks exacerbate inequality, and climate risk and biodiversity loss and environmental risks amongst these risks are particularly destructive of lives and futures for people and communities. So when we say let's eliminate poverty, we are not saying that is the only thing we need to focus on. We need to focus on creating a sustainable planet where everyone can live together. Of course, wars, conflicts are development in reverse. People's livelihoods, as you'll hear from Syria and elsewhere, get destroyed by this. And so peace is absolutely fundamental to the elimination of poverty. It's no accident that the most intractable poverty in the world is in fragile states, where there are virtually no governments, where governments are in conflict. The raising of walls around our societies is another huge impediment to poverty reduction and the reductions in inequality. Our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents escaped famines, pogroms, wars, by being refugees and by being migrants. None of us would be here tonight if that had not happened. A third of Ireland migrated, a third of Sweden migrated, a third of Italy migrated. That's how those people and their grandparents maintained their families and survived. But those walls that are going up now and keeping people out mean that people are trapped in poverty. They cannot escape. And that trapping is going to increase poverty in many, many ways. Within our societies, there's also been capture. There's been capture of government by the very wealthy. And this has to be reversed if we're to overcome poverty and reduce inequality. The top 1% of people in the US now have 40% of the wealth. They had 30% before the financial crisis. In the UK, the equivalent number is they had about 19% before the financial crisis, and today they have 25%. This is not simply because they've been able to hold on to their assets and diversify, as we learn from The Guardian, through Paradise Financial Structures or Panama, but also because poor people don't have the savings to withstand these crises. And because the rich are able to buy the lobbying power, to put them in power, and of course, to reduce taxes. And taxes are absolutely central to the redistribution of income and expenditures, which are vital for poverty reduction. For investing in social security safety nets, for investing in health, in education, in unemployment benefit, and all these other things. And so the capture of governments by elites is a deeply troubling thing and has to be stopped if we're to eliminate poverty and inequality. We need to ensure that we know that our voice is heard in government and that the voice of the wealthy and wealthiest is not more powerful than ours. That is the fundamental basis of a democracy. But when you need billions of dollars to become the president of the United States, tens of millions of dollars to be a congressperson, you can hardly say that ordinary people can become a president. And so our political structures need to change. And when you see the populism and the anger, you wonder why people are saying, we don't trust the experts, we don't trust authority, we don't trust globalization. My view is that's because the system has let people down terribly badly. There is rising inequality. The world is far from being more flat, it's being more mountainous. It is more and more difficult to be at the frontier of change. Ratios of rentals or house prices in London, not least in this area where we are here, to incomes are at record highs. And the same is true of every dynamic city in the world. If you're in these right places at the right times with the right skills, you do very well. But if you're not, it's more and more difficult to get there. And that's why the divides within our society, the divides between London and the southeast of England and the rest of England, or between the coastal and dynamic cities of the US and the Midwest, or Mumbai and the rest of India, or Shanghai and the countryside in China, are greater and greater. Inequality is economic geography. Inequality is about where people are, about place, and about whether people can be there. Unemployment in London is an almost record low. Incomes are relatively high. But if you can't get here, you can't be part of that. And so addressing things like housing markets, transport systems, getting to places becomes essential to this. If you're in the Midwest of the US today, Your life expectancy in many towns of the Midwest is lower than your parents'. Your prospects of getting a job are lower than your parents'. And your chances of moving home are half of what your parents were. And your unemployment rates are double. And then you wonder why people vote for Trump and extremists. The system is not working for ordinary people in many parts of the world. And this is a fault not only of the right-wing governments, but of the left-wing governments too. People have been let down. There are new forces coming which will compound this problem that we need to think very deeply about. One of them is automation. Groups in the Oxford Martin School estimate that about 40% of UK jobs, 47% in the US, about 60% in China, are vulnerable to machine intelligence and robotics over the next 20 years. Anything that's very routine and rules-based, whether it's manufacturing something, or a call center, or a back office, an administrative task, can be done by computers in the future and robotics. So what is our development model? How are people going to be employed? And these are the reasons I'm setting out why I say we need to redouble our efforts, to ensure that we don't look back on this time and say, this was the successful time in poverty reduction, because we have an ambition. We have an ambition that we know more than ever before. We have more learning. We have more capacity to understand what's happening. None of us can say we don't know that's happening. Our veil of ignorance has been lifted by the power of social media, of information that we have. So let's not, wherever we are in the world, say we don't know. And we also can't say we don't know what to do, because there are thousands and thousands of case studies of people that have escaped poverty, of systems that are working. The way that the financial crisis has impacted on different countries is extremely different. In some countries, it didn't lead to any increase in inequality or poverty, and in others, poverty and inequality was increased dramatically. There are great experiments going on all over the world which show what can be done, and there are inspirational people all over the world that show that we as individuals can make a difference, that we can spark off each other, that we can learn more rapidly because we have this connectivity. So the excuses are fading away. It's become a time of choice. It's become a time when we need to say, what's important to us? What do we believe in? How much difference are we as individuals going to make to this problem? And the ideas that you hear are, I hope, inspirational to you and will help you make that difference. Thank you very much.